Good morning, everybody, and it's Tuesday, yes, all day, and welcome to Penn Vicarage. Lovely to see you, and as always, thank you so much for joining us for our adventure through the book of Exodus. And today we are in chapter 10, so without further ado, Exodus chapter 10. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, and the hearts of his officials, in order that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I have made fools of the Egyptians, and what signs I have done among them, so that you may know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, so they may worship me. For if you refuse to let my people go tomorrow, I'll bring locusts into your country. They shall cover the surface of the land, so that no one shall be able to see the land. They shall devour the last remnant left you after the hail, and they shall devour every tree of yours that grows in the field. They shall fill your houses and the houses of your officials and all the Egyptians, something that neither you, your parents, nor your grandparents have seen from the day they came on earth to this day." So he turned and went out from Pharaoh. Pharaoh's officials said to him, "How long shall this fellow be a snare to us? Let the people go, so they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not yet understand that Egypt is ruined?" So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go worship the Lord your God. But which ones are to go?" Moses said, "We will go with our young and our old. We will go with our sons and daughters, and with our flocks and herds, because we have the Lord's festival to celebrate." He said to them, "The Lord indeed will be with you, if ever I let your little ones go with you. Plainly, you have some evil purpose in mind." "No, never. Your men may go and worship the Lord, for that's what they're asking." And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt, so that the locusts may come upon it and eat every plant in the land, all that the hail has left." So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. When morning came, the east wind had brought the locusts. The locusts came upon all the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt. Such a dense swarm of locusts has never been seen before, nor ever shall again. They covered the surface of the whole land, so the land was black, and they ate all the plants in the land and all the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. Nothing green was left, no tree, no plant in the land, in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh hurriedly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Do forgive my sin just this once, and pray to the Lord your God that at least he will remove this deadly thing from me." So he went out from Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord changed the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in all the country of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand towards heaven, so there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand towards heaven, and there was a dense darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days they could not move from where they were. But all the Israelites had light where they lived. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, "Go worship the Lord. Only your flocks and your herds shall remain behind. Even your children may go with you." But Moses said, "You must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings to sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock must go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind, for we must choose some of them for the worship of the Lord our God, and we will not know what to use to worship the Lord until we arrive there." But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was unwilling to let them go. Then Pharaoh said to him, Get away from me. Take care that you do not see my face again, for on the day that you see my face you shall die." Moses said, "Just as you say, I will never see your face again." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The plot thickens and the temperature rises. Remind you what's happening. God's people were slaves in Egypt really badly, and they cried to God, and God heard them. And God said to Pharaoh, the man in charge, through Moses, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said no. So God sent some signs, using a staff and using a leprous stroke, not leprous hand, and a sign was some blood on the ground as well. But even that wasn't enough for Pharaoh. So God sent a whole series of plagues to kind of show Pharaoh that God meant business, really. And we've had 7 so far, including frogs, gnats, boils, hail, and various other unpleasant things. And Pharaoh still doesn't get the message. And people often kind of wonder what this is really about. And I think there's a couple of things, personally, just to say in particular, about why God's doing this and why it had happened. I think God did this in such a way that generations to come would know that they had left Egypt by an act of God. That it wasn't by cleverness, that it wasn't by some freak of nature, that it wasn't because of Moses creeping up to the right people or bribery or anything like that. This was clearly, abundantly and unashamedly and indisputably an act of God. And I think God does that in our lives sometimes. Sometimes when we get called to things or whatever, God does it in such a way that it can be indisputably an act of God. And I believe that when God set his people free, he did it in such a way that in years to come, when people look back on it, they would know that definitively within the life of the people of God, God did this. And it could only have been, and it was only, an act of God. Not a clever act of Moses. It wasn't Moses that did it, God did it. So we've had 7 plagues so far. Today we have 2 more. We have the locusts and we have the darkness. Okay. And notice the plagues at the point are getting stronger and stronger, sort of getting stronger and stronger by the plague. So what's the locusts all about? Well, locusts, like the black grasshopper things, they come and they completely devastate the land. And whatever green plant to be left by the hail gets destroyed by the locusts. That's a demonstration. Now, just a few little quick pointers about this. Locusts are a sign of God's judgment. In the same way, hail and lightning are, angry storms can be signs of God's judgment. Locusts were always thought in those days as a sign of God's judgment. Also, it's quite interesting. It's also because a bit of kind of creation in reverse. That in Genesis chapter 1, God created all the green things that grow in the garden, and here they get destroyed. So in a sense, you get creation kind of in reverse. You also get darkness, which prefigures the next plague that was to come. And you get the east wind bringing the plagues, which is similar to the east wind, which would eventually part the Red Sea, which we shall see in the next couple of chapters. You also notice that the locusts then get blown back into the Red Sea again, and they drown in the Red Sea, again prefiguring what's going to happen in the next couple of chapters. So what I'm saying is, this is not just one plague on its own. You can see that it's part of it. So the darkness alludes to the one that's coming, to the next plague, and the locust being then from the east wind and back in, drowning in the Red Sea, showing, in a sense, what is due to happen in the next couple of chapters too. So you kind of see that. And the other thing which is worth saying through this is that another reason why God did this in such a way is that to show that I am the Lord, he says. And notice that through this, the Egyptians gradually get the message. So with the locusts, Pharaoh's people are getting sick of it. So Pharaoh lets them kind of go, but only the men can go. And then the next one is, well, you can go, but you've got to leave your livestock behind. And you get people harassing Pharaoh and say, look, can't you not see the land's in trouble? Just for goodness sake, let these people go. And Pharaoh still won't. But there is a sense in which the people of Egypt and the people of Pharaoh are starting to get the message that God is powerful and that God is not to be messed with, and that they're being stubborn to their own cost, really. So they do gradually get to know God as things go on. So there's a few pointers for you. So a few things to think about. The plagues are not just one on their own, but they're very much part of a set. It was also about the Egyptians gradually getting to know who God is. That it's a sign of judgment, and as I say, that the plagues getting stronger and stronger each time. So that's a few thoughts about the locust one. Then the darkness. Well, it's quite often thought that what's going on here is the Egyptians worshipped a sun god called Re, R-E. And in a sense, by bringing in darkness, it was in a sense demonstrating that God, Almighty God, has power over the Egyptian god Re. And I gather Pharaoh would sometimes be called Re. If some people would worship him, he was known as Re as well. So demonstrating by bringing the plague of the darkness that God is more powerful again than the Egyptian gods and much more powerful than Pharaoh himself. Also, darkness in the Bible is code for chaos. In the early days, when there was darkness over the face of the abyss in Genesis chapter 1, God made dark. God created the light in the dark, and God said, "Let there be light." So, in a sense, what he was doing here, in a sense, was a kind of reverse of creation as well. So again, God demonstrating his power, that things that only God can do, creating darkness and light and so on. God did that, and thus demonstrating his power here. And then at the end, Pharaoh banishes Moses from his presence. Now we know, of course, what happens in the next chapter, which is absolutely and utterly devastating. And the irony is that by banishing Moses, actually Pharaoh is banishing his last chance. Moses was actually God's gift to Pharaoh to set the people free, to see the error of you as the human face, if you like. And that Moses brought God's message. And actually today, people need to hear God's message. And in places where Christian people are persecuted, or Christians are banned, or Christians are shut up, or whatever. In a sense, by doing so, what they're actually doing is banishing from themselves the message that they really need to hear. It's like banishing doctors when you're ill or something. It's that level of foolishness. And that's in a sense what they're doing. And by banishing Moses in the end from his presence, Pharaoh is actually banishing his last chance. And that's kind of what he does. So lots to think about there in these two plagues: the locusts with the devastation, with God showing his power. There's the plagues are very much part of a set, or what God is doing, and likewise the darkness showing God's power over creation, God's power over much more power than any other Egyptian gods, and so on. But again, through the whole thing, this is a demonstration of the fact that God's people were slaves in Egypt, and they were set free. But they weren't set free by their own cleverness. They weren't set free by their own power or by their own, clever diplomatic skills or anything. They were set free by an act of God. It was an act of God. It can only have been an act of God. God did it, and it's indisputably shown here in the book of Exodus 2. My friends, God is God, and God reigns, and God knows what he's doing. And God's more powerful than Pharaoh. God's more powerful than any Egyptian gods. And God is more powerful than anything we can ever encounter. My friends, God bless you. Have a lovely Tuesday. Enjoy your day, and thanks for watching, and